Last week, the Supreme Court upheld President Obama's health care law, but they ruled that the individual mandate, which requires virtually all Americans to obtain health insurance coverage, is a tax that falls within Congress's power. But back in 2009, when he was pushing the legislation, President Obama said it would not become a tax.
No, that's not true, George. For us to say that you've got to take a responsibility to get health insurance is absolutely not a tax increase.
But the fact that the Supreme Court says it's a tax has put the Obama administration in a tough position, and they don't want to call it what it is.
No, what this is a law that says if you can afford insurance and you choose not to buy it and you choose to have your health costs be a burden to others, you'll pay a penalty so that you'll pay your fair share.
Well, if Chief Justice Roberts is their new best friend, all that is worldly and reasonable, the least they could do is quote him accurately. Greg, I felt yesterday when Jack Lew was talking that it was a little bit of a tortured explanation, and I immediately thought of you.
Oh, well, how sweet of you. Here, this is what I don't get. Why isn't the left denying this win? They got what they wanted. It's like that Miss America contestant who spends her whole entire life trying to win that crown, and when she does win, she acts like she's shocked. They have been trying. So FDR tried. Hillary tried. Pelosi pushed it through. They got what they wanted, socialized medicine. Why don't they just admit they won and be done with it?
Well, the interesting thing, Kimberly, is that when President Obama said that to George Stephanopoulos, I guess that was their position. Then when they went to court to file the briefs, the Solicitor General argued that it was a tax so that they could keep it constitutional. Why would they deny it now?
Well, I think it's perfectly in keeping with how they operate, you know. I mean, in terms of their campaigning, it's whatever it takes to do to win, whoever they need to pander to. And for this, I mean, look, they're going to take a win whatever way they can get it. I don't know why they would try and disavow it, because they were able to get through thanks to Chief Justice Roberts, who made it fit and made it work for them.
And Bob, so if you're if you keep your political hat on for a second. If you are in Chicago and you're looking at this, you're like, oh my gosh, we don't want to be labeled as the biggest tax increaser in the last 20 years. What would you advise them?
Well, first of all, I would advise them that there's absolutely nothing different today than if they had gone along with the Commerce Clause and said this was a fine. Right. Nobody argued at this table, or most of the opponents of health care argued the tax issue at all until Roberts made it into, quote, a tax.
Until they argued that in front of the Solicitor General.
That's right. The Solicitor General did make that
President Obama made that his
a second-tier argument after the Commerce Clause. But the fact is there's nothing different today than if they had ruled on the Commerce Clause. You keep talking about taxes and the rest of it. A fine is a fine, is a tax is a tax is a fine. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is you didn't make this issue a tax issue until Roberts made it a tax issue.
I just said, Bob, in the Solicitor General, in their argument in front of the Supreme Court on behalf of President Obama, argued that it was a tax 2 weeks after President Obama said that to Stephanopoulos. So how did Roberts come up with it out of thin air? It was actually agreeing with the Solicitor General.
He was asked, what is his name, Vermilli? Is that his name? Was asked the question, could this be construed as a tax? And in part of their brief, there was a tax aspect to it. They wanted it to be done in the Commerce Clause. It was not. I think Roberts was very shrewd in how he did this, by the way. But the fact is that there is nothing different about Obamacare if it had been a fine or a tax or the Commerce Clause or a tax.
Bob's saying he doesn't care. They got to the outcome.
And by the way, the idea that socialized medicine is just the most absurd, crazy idea I've ever heard.
No, it's not. Eric, you're shaking your head, and I wanted to go to you last so you could sum it up, because when is a tax not a tax?
When the Supreme Court says the only way it passes is if we call it a tax, because it's a tax. So therefore it is a tax. The scary part is ever since it was called a tax and passed because it was a tax, the Democrats have been saying it's not a tax. Well, if it's not, then guess what? Let's go back to the Commerce Clause argument, and it will fail. So therefore you have to stay with the tax. My problem is this. We're out here fighting, the conservatives are fighting to call it what it is, a tax. And then Mitt Romney's guy, Eric Fernstrom, comes out today and says, it's not a tax.
The mandate is not a tax.
What in the world are you? You know what, Eric? Do us all a favor. Take a vacation. Come back November 7th after the election, because it's a tax.
Wait a minute. Of all the discussions we've had about Obamacare around this table, not one of you ever raised the tax issue. Not one of you.
Because it was never an issue. It was the Commerce Clause. It was, can you require?
They were saying it wasn't a tax. We stupidly took them at
their
word.
We
thought maybe they weren't lying, or maybe they were competent. Turns out they're lying and incompetent.
So now you're calling it a tax, and that makes it different than if
we didn't call it a tax, Bob. This table didn't call it a tax.
You didn't raise taxes at this table.
The Supreme Court Justice Roberts called it a tax. tax, and therefore it passed because it was a tax. Not
Why
us.
didn't you
also go
argue
to
about
one
the
other-
tax aspect of it before?
Because President Obama said it wasn't a tax.
Oh, so that
Now the Chief Justice, who they're hanging their hats on, as having upheld the law, has called it a tax, and then they try to say that it's not. Look,
Because
don't
they got the
insult
heads
us,
up
okay?
that would
There's
work.
one thing, like sore losers
Seriously.
are really annoying. Sore winners are even worse.
What?
And the fact that this goes
Thumbs
to
down.
almost all Americans that didn't, they're like, whoa, 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 this is a tax? Why is the IRS hiring 4,500 new agents to collect a tax? And let's listen to Steve Moore real quick and then get your reaction to this. Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal chief
On one hand,
economist.
during the campaign, the president said that no one who makes under $200,000 will pay a dime of new taxes. But guess what? The court decided on Thursday that this is a tax increase. And you're quite right, it's over $1 trillion over the next 10 years. The Congressional Budget Office, which says that about 75% of the taxes will be paid by people who make less than $120,000. And by my calculations, about half of those people are making somewhere between $25,000 and $75,000 a year.
And Steve's an interesting guy with numbers. He's also a right-winger who's hated this thing from the beginning. You guys, you say don't insult your intelligence. Don't insult my intelligence by telling me that somehow this world is all different because of that ruling. It is let's assume they've approved it on the Commerce Clause. Would you be sitting here saying it's a tax?
No, because it would have
been a fine, right? It would have been a fine. It would have been a fine.
No. You're conflating two arguments here. There are two taxes. One is the penalty tax for not having insurance. The other one, which what Steve Moore was talking about, is the $675 billion of new increased tax revenue that are in the bill. Those are two different things. So, yes, the $675 billion would still be there and borne by the middle class. But the penalty
Why is it borne by the
tax-
middle class? I don't understand that.
Because
you do the
affects
math,
the people,
Bob.
Yeah, it affects
Wait a
people under
second. The people who
$120,000
don't
a
buy
year.
insurance are going to get a fine
It's a different
tax.
one. You're conflating this with the other
It's
new.
75%
Well, why didn't you raise this to all these other
Obama's
Everyone
taxes?
did, Bob.
Not
No one
his-
wanted to hear it.
I feel like you're playing ping pong with a blow dryer. Ball just keeps coming back, going all over the place. Look, this is what happens when you don't know what's in a bill. What Pelosi said, you got to pass this thing before you can see what's in it.
Right.
That's what you do with a kidney stone. You don't do that with 1/5 of the economy.
Ew.
And this is what we're dealing
So
with.
if you're an
Whether
opponent of
it's
this
a
tax, why don't you read the bill?
No, why do I have to read, 2,000 pages? Why didn't you read it? Why didn't your people read it?
Because I thought...
Why did you push it through through reconciliation or whatever you called it?
Whatever it took.
Thank you
And
for
now
admitting that.
they get to win either way because it doesn't matter what you call it.
See?
That's
Can I make
not.
one
That's what I
final
just
point?
said in the beginning
The
of the
reason
show.
why the Obama administration is pushing back from tax, it's politically it's horrible for them.
It's a dirty
but more
word.
importantly, if it is a tax, it's a budget item. And if it's a budget item, to have it repealed, it only requires a 51 vote in Senate.
We'll figure out a way
instead
to
of
get
two-thirds
around
vote.
that. Believe me, you'll never get it through reconciliation.
Right, and so and there goes America straight down the tube.
Oh,
Kimberly,
straight down.
And what did he say? Whatever it takes, because they don't care.
And then
I mean,
what are you going to do? What are you going to do about the 30 million people who don't have health
I'm
insurance?
so
Listen,
All right,
let me
all right.
tell
Can
you
you
something,
tell
Bob.
me-
You
What are you
don't give them
gonna
a
do?
bad,
Can
you don't give
tell
them a
me
bad
who's in that 30
solution
million,
and cripple the
please?
middle
Who are all those
class
people?
with taxes.
How many are U.S. citizens? All of them? Are all of them?
I'd assume they're not
How many
all.
can afford it but aren't getting it?
Well, that's
I
the
want to know
point.
that. How many are already eligible?
Greg,
That number gets
if you
smaller
take a
and smaller.
young person who thinks that they're invincible and they break their back and they become a quadriplegic for life, who pays for it? We
You
do.
can pull out an isolated
Oh my
example
gosh.
anytime you want, but
It
that
happens all
doesn't
the
fight
time.
that doesn't fight the overall facts that the number was inflated to create an entitlement that we're paying for.
Well,
And the other thing is that all of us were promised that you could keep your doctor if you want to. Not true. They also said that premiums will go down. That's not true. You cannot force everybody in the world or in America to purchase a product and then expect the cost to go down.
No.
That won't happen.
of course it will.
And then they
of
fine
course
you.
it will.
The laws of supply and demand don't
And
work
not
that
only
way.
that,
No,
this
if you have
is-
more supply, then that means that and more
More
demand.
supply would be the market,
Not only
this.
that,
No,
Bob,
it's compelled action, so it's not going to work that way at all.
This genius former Speaker of the House yesterday, I believe, said, oh, now there's a $4,000 tax credit for middle-income families. There's also a tax credit for businesses. How in the world do you insure 30 million more people,
Right.
offer tax credits to the middle class, offer tax credits
Right.
to businesses, and have it not cost substantially
And
more
how
money?
do you insure 30 million people then? If you've got some idea, why don't you tell us what
Bob,
it is?
here's
And
how you
like
do it.
Jasper chasing his tail, we've gone around and around.
You worked your dog into this. That's $1 to Obama's
no,
fund.
I think you and I have settled that, and Jasper is back on the
When?
table.
That's $2.
That's $2. You mentioned your dog's name.
Jasper, coming
That's
up.
$4.
Chief Justice John Roberts reportedly switched his vote on Obamacare that we were just talking about after initially siding with the conservatives What made him change his mind? Some interesting news on that when we come back.
It's gonna be another flip-flop summer. Kick off your shoes and call up your lover. Say, hey.